This is the Digital Marketing Experts Podcast episode. No, why am I trying to sound like a radio announcer? Experts in the Wire, episode 100. Marie Haynes. Hey everyone, welcome to episode 100 of Experts on the Wire. When I started this podcast 100 episodes ago in March of 2016, I had no idea where it would end up. But fast forward 2.5 years later, and Experts has been downloaded over 370,000 times. But I think even more important are all the messages you send me saying how this podcast has helped you. For example, this note I just got the other day from a guy by the name of Rustlin on LinkedIn. It said, I would like to send you a huge thank you for all the things you do with this podcast. I invest 10 to 15 hours a week to learn new stuff, and your podcast is the golden nugget. And I get messages like that all of the time. So I think that is the most rewarding thing of doing the show, is hearing that it's actually helping you out there with your SEO. So whether you're a longtime listener or just joining us for the first time, I want to extend a huge thanks for being a part of Experts on the Wire. And as a thanks, that leads me to this episode 100. What you're about to hear was recorded on September 18th over Skype group chat. So for one, that means we were dealing with Skype audio, which I've spent hours EQing and compressing to make it sound as good as possible. But more important, I hope this gives context to our discussion about the latest Google algorithm updates. In this episode, Marie and I chat a little bit about those. There was one recent update since September 18th, but that doesn't really change much about what we're saying in this discussion. And finally, do know that I've edited this recording to take out some pauses and technical glitches from Skype and just to kind of speed it up a little bit. So this show is not about me. And although it's a lot about the guests, this podcast is ultimately about you, the listener, and your journey through this world of SEO. So I thought by having Marie Haynes back on the show and inviting 3 listeners to ask us questions live, which you're going to hear in this episode, I thought that would be just a small way to continue providing value, to give back to you, the listener, to say thanks and give value to everybody out there listening. This was a great discussion with awesome questions. So let's jump right into episode 100 of Experts on the Wire. Marie, thank you so much for joining us again on Experts on the Wire. This is officially episode number 100. And, I've really been going back and forth trying to figure out what to do on episode 100. It feels like a monumental achievement, etc. But I've always had this idea where I wanted to get a couple SEO consultants on the line and take calls from people, because I think about all the ways, even when I was learning SEO years ago, and even now, if you're somebody struggling with SEO, you're trying to learn, there's not a lot of great ways to reach out and actually just chat with an SEO consultant for free for a few minutes to ask a few quick questions. I know John Mueller at Google has really great webmaster hangouts, and there are some resources out there, but I think it's still a little bit lacking. So I wanted to provide this as something for people to just pick up the phone and call an SEO consultant and ask some questions. But I also think it might make for a really interesting podcasting format as well. And this episode is an experiment, so we will see what happens. I think it'll be a lot of fun. So Marie, thank you for joining us. How are you today?
I'm good, Dan. Thanks so much for having me, and congrats on 100 episodes. That's amazing. Good stuff. Yeah. So I'm excited about this format. I think it's going to work really well. I think it'll do well for you.
Also, I want to mention to all the listeners, you have your own podcast, Search News You Can Use. I love the title of that. It's a podcast. You have this in video format, I believe, and a newsletter. So I want to just point all the listeners to that as well. To definitely go sign up for the newsletter. I'm on it. It's great. It's like the number one. It's the first place I go when algorithm updates have happened or I need to catch up on the news and search, which is basically like every day it seems like there's something happening. So I can literally go to my inbox and just search news you can use, and I can read up on all your newsletters and get caught up. So I want to point all the listeners to that. So what's the URL they can go to check out your newsletter?
Thanks. And I'm embarrassed to say we don't actually have a page on our website yet for the newsletter. But if you can, it's on iTunes and it's on Google Play Music, and you can either search my name, so Marie Haynes, or search news you can use, and you'll find it. So it's been fun. I mean, I think we probably have a lot of crossover with our audiences that, I think we talk about kind of different topics, but yeah, so I've been trying to keep my team updated on what Google's doing. And I thought, well, in the process, I might as well keep everybody updated. And so it's a lot of fun. I'm enjoying it so far.
Awesome. So before we bring Steve on the line, the first caller, I want to chat and get your perspective on what was initially the big update on the beginning of August, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, et cetera. It was rolling out. And then what seems to have been some fine-tunings or further updates that have happened since then. What do you feel like you've learned since the August 1st, 2nd, 3rd update? And let's start there. That's first part of the question is, what have you learned? What do you think this update is really about in a broad sense? And then number two, I want to get a sense to see if you think there's been more updates since then.
Sure. So the August 1st update really had two major components. One was organic and one was local. And we think that the local update actually hit on July 31st, which, it makes it really difficult to tell the difference of what's happening here. And so in terms of the local update, I don't have a lot of really good information. I do think that Google is giving more weight to some businesses that actually are local. I noticed that a bunch of multinational multi-location chains are seeing some drops, and the sites that are taking over the rankings are kind of a local, business. And so that's something that we don't have 100%, information on that. In terms of organic, though, this was a huge update. So if all the updates, I've been following algorithm updates and writing about them since 2011. And this is one of the biggest ones that I've seen. Yeah. Now, it didn't affect every site on the internet, but the sites that it affected, it tended to affect it very strongly.
Yes.
And so I wrote a post on this a while back where I made the comments where this seemed to really strongly affect sites that Google would consider your money or your life. So sites that just were really important for people who are making life decisions, whether it's financial, medical, legal. But it's not just those sites that were affected. We've seen a lot of different niches that were affected. But by far, sites that were medical in nature, really, a lot of those were affected. And sites that sell medical devices, so things like, blood testing monitors, blood pressure monitors, things like that. We've seen a lot of those. And I would say that the number one factor, because now we've reviewed quite a few sites that were hit at this time, the number one factor is trust. That Google is finding ways to demote sites or businesses that have trust issues. And we're seeing that a lot of the businesses that had their rankings demoted are ones that maybe had like a negative Better Business Bureau listing, because that's in the quality raters guidelines. Sites where people are complaining all over the place on refund policies. So if you have tons of complaints on refund policies that users are not being able to get refunds, then you may have seen a drop in organic rankings. And so I really think, to sum it all up, is that what Google is doing is trying not to promote sites that may be trying to trick users or deceive users, or that generally people just don't like.
And have you seen any recoveries? I mean, I know it's typically too early. I typically see these recoveries happening in a 3 or 4 month time period. So it is early, but have you seen any indications of sites that have made some changes yet and had any impacts?
I've seen some sites that have seen a measure of recovery, but I wouldn't attribute that recovery to, anything that we've done or any changes that they've made. I think that there's been a few sort of tremors after this big update in terms of Google making changes. And I think, this happens every time they have a massive algorithm update, is they tweak things and they look at it. I would imagine they look at results and they say, we didn't accomplish our goal in this search result, so let's tweak the algorithm a little bit. And so there have been some dates on which we've seen some sites make improvements, but I think that it's more Google just sort of turned the dial on things a little bit differently. And so in terms of like massive recoveries, we haven't seen any yet. And I think this is going to be a hard algorithm update to recover from, because it's not like you can, just change your title tags or disavow some links. Like you have to legitimately change business practices for most of these businesses that are hit, which is not something that's going to happen quickly.
Awesome. So we may circle back to that in between callers. I'm feeling out the format here, but let's try to add Steve, our first caller. I looked up how to do this, and this is where I'm going to edit. Oh, add people. Let's see. Add Steve. Something's happening. I need to just maybe figure out how to do this with an actual phone line. Steve.
Hey, Dan, how's it going?
Hey, good, Steve. How are you?
I'm good. Can you hear me okay?
I can. You were the first ever actual call-in to Experts in the Wire podcast.
Oh, man, what an honor.
And Marie Haynes, who's on the line, by the way, is also in Canada, just like you are.
Yes. Hey, Marie, how's it going?
Hey, I'm good, Steve. How are you?
Let's jump into your question, Steve. So actually, the format of this call-in is going to go like this. We don't know the questions. I know you sent them. I didn't look at them because at some point this might actually be live, right? So I want to have it be very sort of impromptu and free-flowing. So Steve, why don't you jump in with your first question for us? And Marie, I'm going to let you answer first, and then I'll answer after that.
Cool, yeah. So I run a website builder review website. So I write reviews of website builders. And like a lot of people, I have a blog that I use for SEO, but I've never been super certain of how or even if my blog helps with SEO. So right now I've got a couple different directions that I'm trying to consider a couple different directions to take the blog. And I'm not sure which direction would most positively impact the SEO of my website. I can share the directions if you'd like.
Yeah, do that. That'd be great.
So here are the 4 different directions I'm thinking about. I could, number 1, so I run a few different businesses. I'm what I might reluctantly call an entrepreneur. So I could document my successes and failures. And then number 2, I could write stories specific to the website builder industry. For example, I could write a story about, there was an AI website builder called The Grid that it got a lot of hype a couple of years ago. I could write a story explaining what happened there. Mm-hmm. Number 3, I could just write some stories about general small business stories. For example, like the economics of temperature, why are movie theaters so cold? 4th one is it's just a question and answers format. So every day I get readers emailing me questions. And I would be answering them in a public format. The questions are all related to website builders.
Great. Marie.
Got it.
Thoughts?
All right. Good stuff, Steve. I think I have a couple of thoughts. So blogging, in my opinion, has really changed in the last few years. I mean, in the past, we would as SEOs, we'd give business owners this advice that you should be blogging every day and you should be creating content every day. And the more content you have, the better. And sometimes I think that can backfire because what people were doing was creating this content that was, nobody was actually wanting to engage with it. It was just words on a page. So what I would say is the best advice I could give you is figure out what it is that you can create that would be better than what already exists online. And so when I write in my blog, which is not as often as I'd like, I only publish something if I know it's going to be super valuable to people. So I'm not going to write something just because I might be able to rank for this and it could bring me business, unless I can actually produce a post that's way better than what already is ranking for that term. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does.
Right. Yeah. And so out of the things you mentioned, I think it really depends on what your users' questions are. So, when you're talking about why does it get cold in a movie theater, that doesn't seem to really relate to your website, unless you're talking about a different website that I haven't seen. So I would focus more on questions about the site builders. And I think your idea of doing a Q&A is a really good idea. The other thing I would say, too, is that I'm a really big fan of what we call hub and spoke content. So basically you have your hub pages are your super important category pages. So, if you have a particular keyword that you want to rank for and you have this one page that's fantastic and, got all this content, well, then you can write supporting blog content that, goes along with that. So you could write you could do a study that has a whole bunch of data in it. You could do a survey amongst a bunch of people and make that a blog post that's super interesting. But then that can link back to your main category page, and you can link internally with nice keyword anchored links to help boost those rankings. So I think when you create blog content, it's twofold in terms of the purpose. The main purpose should be, is this something that people are truly going to find helpful and engage with? And then the second purpose is this something that's going to support the rest of my content?
Mm.
Hey, Steve.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Steve.
That second point about, is this something that's going to support the rest of the content, I think is really interesting. A couple of years ago, I wrote a blog post about Elon Musk's first company, Zip2, and that's actually done fairly well, and people actually occasionally link to it, share it on social media. But it's always sort of made me scratch my head and sort of wonder, well, is this helping? Does this actually support the rest of my content?
Hey, Steve, let me clarify. You're talking about adding a blog on your website builder website, or is this a separate blog that's more centric to you, the person?
This is a blog that's on my website builder website.
Okay. Yeah, I think just to echo what Marie said is what are the topics that would align best to your goals of that site? And I would think about it just like the basic fundamental of SEO is starting with the keyword, right? I would just try to identify keywords that represent topics that align with all the things Marie mentioned. So stuff that you can add value to, etc. But things that also align with what do you think has a decent potential of being the right visitor for your website? Because I think, we can make the case for any type of traffic. I know I like to make the case for top of funnel, mid funnel, bottom of funnel. So I don't think it's a question of trying to hit a converting traffic source, for example, like somebody that's going to instantly, be a lead for you or whatever your conversion metric is. I think it's more a matter of aligning, targeting topics that will draw in the right visitor, the person that might be building their own website. So what I would actually do, honestly, is start by making a mind map of all of the random topics that you can just brainstorm off the top of your head, where you start in the middle, you draw a circle and you put website builders on that. And then you do a line in the circle and maybe you put Shopify. And then you do e-commerce, and then you do shoes, and then you do point of sale system, etc. You start to try to build just a raw list of topics that you can use as a starting point. I would begin thinking about topic and keyword centric rather than, I think what you're doing is you're kind of going, where are the opportunities that I could maybe sort of force into something that would be helpful for the website builder website.
Yeah.
But I know where you're going with this question, though, Steve, because I think what you're saying is, for example, the post on Elon Musk, it's not related to your topic, but it got links, right? And it got attention. So do those things actually help? And I don't know that anybody really has the answer to that. It reminds me of a situation. I worked with a site a few years ago, and I'm going to change the details because I have some non-disclosures with them. But they had this one post that was ranking for, imagine it was baby names, names to name your baby. And it was getting 100,000 visits a day. It was insane. But the post had nothing to do with their actual, their business area. And so there was all this debate amongst myself and the other SEO related teams that were working together as to whether that post was helping them or hurting them. And my opinion was, if it's getting links and it's getting traffic, that traffic is not going to convert as well as some other traffic. But I still thought it was a decent thing to have on the site. And then other people said, well, it's messing with our ability to look at analytics. We have to filter out that page because the rest of our site only gets 100 visits a day. And the point is that I think if you have content that's not related to your site, but it is performing well, I'd keep it. But in terms of adding new content, I would stay away from things that aren't really relevant to your topics. That's my personal thought.
So, Steve, I hope that's helpful. I believe maybe you had a couple other follow-up questions or no?
No, actually, I don't. That was sort of the main thrust of the question.
Oh, okay, great.
What should I do with this blog? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I hope that was helpful, Steve, and I appreciate you putting your hat in the ring there to be the first call-in on Experts in the Wire. I'll give you the option to say your website if you'd like. 3,000 to 4,000 people are going to hear this, so if you want people to check it out, that's up to you.
Sure, yeah. Well, thanks for having me on as the first call-in guest. My website is sitebuilderreport.com. And big fan of both your work. I subscribe to Marie's newsletter, and obviously I listen to Experts on the Wire. So thanks, guys.
Awesome. Thanks, Steve.
Thanks, Steve. Yeah, that was a good question.
Awesome. All right. Talk to you later.
Take care. So I think he just hangs up.
Oops.
Let's
see. How do I do
this out.
this? All right. There we go.
Okay.
There we go.
I think he's gone. Okay. So, Maria, I'm going to circle back to the algorithm update. Then we're going to bring in the second caller. You were talking about how, this is really people needing to change things at the core business level. I'm wondering, though, because I'm aware of some sites that are pure content sites. They're publishers or they're, blogs that have been around for a really long time that have been providing really, really great information. And they don't even have customer support because they don't sell products. They don't have a Better Business Bureau page because they're not that type of website. They're very high quality content sites that have been hit. Some are in the medical or nutrition space that I'm aware of. So I'm wondering, does trust play a factor for those in some way or another that, they might have a little bit more control over?
Well, I think that trust plays a factor in pretty much every website. And one of the elements of trust is also your external reputation in terms of, do you even have a reputation? So one of the things that I'm seeing is, I'm seeing people are starting to pay attention to EAT, right? Expertise, authoritativeness, and trust. And people are saying, well, I'm a doctor and I write this content and I'm very well known and I'm good at my stuff. And yet I saw a ranking drop. And if I search for this doctor's name, often I can't find anything about them other than their own website. Yeah. And so this is something that it's in the Quality Raters Guidelines again. And I mean, John Mueller has said that the Quality Raters Guidelines, they're not exactly 100%. This is how the algorithms work. But there was actually a really good article on CNBC this week that was a quote from a Googler that said, it's not exactly how the algorithms work, but this is where we want to see them go. And so the Quality Raters Guidelines, they instruct the raters to look and see, can you find external reputation information? So when we do our site quality reports, one of the things we do is we look at who's already ranking for your main keyword. And then we search for that business name. And we can almost always see now with the way that the algorithm is now that this either website or author has been written about in authoritative places. And so when we search for their name, we can see here's a Forbes article, here's a New York Times article, they got mentioned on Wikipedia, things like that. Whereas the site that just has good information, if you don't have other people talking about you, then you're going to have difficulty ranking, and this brings it all back to links too, right? Google knows which links are important and which links are just I got a guest post on this site that allows everybody to guest post. So it's all sort of factored together. But I think what Google's trying to do is figure out, is this person or this business or this website known widely as the authority in their space.
Right. So I think that was a really good point. Maybe it's just the lack of the fact that they don't have a Better Business Bureau page is sort of a signal there. I think that makes a lot of sense.
I think it's possible. I mean, what the guidelines say is that if you have a negative Better Business Bureau rating, so the example they give is a site that has an F rating on the Better Business Bureau, that can be a sign of very low quality. Mm-hmm. They say that, just having a BBB page isn't necessarily high quality because any business can have a page. Just means, nobody's taken the time to actually complain. But so I'm more concerned about the negative ones. One of the sites that we reviewed had on their Better Business Bureau, they had a big red warning at the top of their profile that said, this business has had lots of complaints about their refund policy.
That doesn't sound good.
And so Yeah, and they saw this massive drop in rankings. So, that's the type of thing that Google's looking at.
Okay, great. Let's bring in the second caller. I'm going to leave it to him to tell us how to pronounce his name. I'm just going to do my job and call him in here. Let's see. This is working fairly smoothly, actually, better than I thought. Okay, here we go. Ring, ring, ring. Yeah, that's interesting. Hello.
Hi, Talmage.
Hi, yeah, this is Dan and Marie. You're on Experts on the Wire.
How's it going? It's weird. It's weird hearing you guys on the phone and not on my radio in the car on my way to work.
Yeah, well, Marie's famous, so I can understand
I'm famous.
So tell me how to pronounce your name so I have it correctly.
Talmage.
Talmage. Okay, perfect.
Talmage.
So why don't you go ahead and give us your first question.
So this is something, I'll give you a little background. This is something that we've been dealing with and wondering about. Can you optimize for TF-IDF, proof terms, semantics, LSI? We've used write.com, which gives you, a breakdown of you should maybe add this term a little bit more. Competitors are using this proof term. They're not necessarily keywords, but they're keywords that use context. Dan, I believe someone on your podcast, I believe is a gal from an agency in Canada, used the example of a wedding ring. A wedding band.
Yes.
Whether if you search for wedding band, you're either going to get a band that plays drums and guitar, or you're going to get rings. And those words that you add can provide context for Google. Anyway, do you think that you can optimize for these terms, or should they just occur naturally when you write the content?
So I'll jump in first. Marie took the first answer on the last question. I'm going to give you sort of my SEO geeky answer and then my practicality answer. The SEO geek in me is like, oh, wow, this is really sounds fascinating. I want to dig into these tools, add all these related terms. Some people call them n-grams, etc. Maybe that's similar. That sort of side of me wants to really get in there and play in the weeds and figure all that stuff out. Now, the practical side of me and the honest side of me says I've never done that ever and still have success ranking content for clients. Now, maybe the writers that create this content are doing these sort of things naturally, organically. Maybe they're doing them on their own. Maybe if I ran them through these tools, I would see these sort of co-occurring terms. And so maybe this is something I should think about doing more proactively. I sort of believe that at the end of the day, if I've done my job and analyzed search results for a particular search query, done my research, really figured out what the user wants for that particular topic and piece of content, that I think that naturally these things are going to work themselves into the content. That's been my practical approach. Maybe I could boost the positioning of things that aren't ranking as well if I employed that a little bit more. So that's kind of my two sides of it. Marie, what do you think?
Yeah, so the whole TF-IDF thing to me sounds kind of like a buzzword. Like I'm the same as Dan. I mean, I haven't dive deep into this, and I know there are tools that you can use to implement this, but to me it just comes down to like regular keyword research, and so we do a lot of, we do look at related terms. Remember back in the day where we'd be like, oh, we need to get the keyword on there, 10% of keyword density. That was actually my very first question in an SEO chat forum, was what keyword density I should be using, and obviously that's like old school stuff now, right? But we'll do things where you've done your keyword research, so you know your main keywords, and then we do all sorts of things to determine what the related keywords are. And one of my favorite tools is just to do a Google search for my keyword, and often if you scroll down to the end of the results, it'll say these things are related to such and such. And so then I get those related terms. I'm like, if Google thinks that's related, then we should probably have that on our page as well. And I'll try to get those related terms somewhere on the page in a way that doesn't sound like an SEO wrote the content, which is tricky. And then I think a lot of the key to success when you're looking at this type of keyword optimization is ongoing, just looking at what's working, and so a month or two later, we'll look at even just Search Console keyword data, which, it's not always 100%, but we'll see like, oh, we're ranking for, this variation and we don't even have it on the page. So let's optimize for that.
Oh, that's great. Thank you.
Yeah, I
believe
I didn't look at your exact questions, but I believe you have a couple other questions too.
Yeah. So this next one, it's great for Marie because you're the Google algorithm queen over there, and I like the penguin I can see in the background. You got the artwork. I really like your analogy about the penguin that you used. I think on your first episode, Dan.
Yep.
Anyway, so the recent algorithm update that kind of took place the end of July, beginning of August, that we're still seeing some tweaks and adjustments. We have a Fortune 500 client here that they're brands that have really strong domains. They saw some fluctuation, but in the end, they're looking great. But some other ones that didn't have as strongest domain authority are suffering a little bit. So what would you say is the reaction that we should do? Because I know that Google's kind of like, good content, that's what you should do. Just great content. But is there anything that we actually can employ to counteract this algorithm update?
Sure, yeah. I'll let Marie jump in 1 second. To give you context, Talmage, we were chatting about this before we brought on callers as well. So this is a perfect question because it gives a great segue to what we were kind of talking about, Marie, which is, I'll let you jump in with his question there. What do you think he should do in that position?
Sure. So, one of the things is that there hasn't been enough time passed for us to say, oh, we implemented this and this site recovered. What Dan and I were just talking about is that there really haven't been any significant recoveries that I've seen since this update happened. There have been some tweaks as Google's changed the algorithm, and some sites that dropped maybe saw some gains or dropped further. I've seen that happen too. But the question is, what can you do? So one of the things that we know is almost every algorithm update that Google's done in the last almost 2 years, in my opinion, has to do with something in the quality raters guidelines. So I would pay lots of attention to everything it says about EAT, expertise, authoritativeness, and trust. Mm-hmm. And I find now that people are paying attention to EAT, they're getting the wrong idea. So I've talked a lot about your company's about page, and I think every one of those clients should have as much braggy information as possible on the about page. So you want to say, we've been in business for this long, and we have these many degrees, and we won these prizes, and things like that. But really, EAT is mostly made from off-site links and mentions. So when you talk about domain authority, domain authority is a Moz term, right? It's not, it's supposed to sort of duplicate what PageRank is, but we know, nobody outside of Google knows exactly how that's determined. Yeah. But it's mostly based on links, right? And so if I have links from very authoritative places, I'm more likely to have higher domain authority. The problem is that you can get high domain authority by tricking. I can buy some expired domains and, do a few tricky SEO, maybe black hat or gray hat type things and get high domain authority, but that may not actually mean that I have authoritative links. So if you have enterprise clients, Fortune 500 clients, by far the best thing I would do is invest in PR. So you want to do things where you get people talking about your brand in a positive light, and people legitimately, because as marketers, we automatically think, okay, I'm going to put out this press release and I'm going to get it syndicated over all these places. And it's not about like how many links can I get? It's about, can you truly generate viral buzz? And so I would say, get these businesses to brainstorm on what can they do so that people actually do want to mention them in these authoritative places. And that's tricky because as the SEO or the marketing agency, like you can only do so much, right? You can't make a business be the best business of their kind. Mm-hmm. You can only suggest things. But I think SEO is changing so much now that you can't take a mediocre business and SEO it to the top, for the most part. I'm sure there's some people that can still do that, but yeah, so I would say, just keep doing everything that you can to be known as a good, trustworthy business that is the authority in their niche.
Yeah, and I'll add a few extra things. I do believe that EAT and trust is at the core of this update, but I would not ignore other broad stroke things like design, navigation, UX, internal site architecture, and content cleanup. I've seen sites recover not from this update, but prior updates that had really terrible supplementary navigation. Again, that's in the Quality Raters guidelines. They updated their sidebars, their main nav, their footer. They unified all the navigation across the site on the top and the bottom. or they updated their design so like you could actually see the links, the hyperlinks in the content. All these little things that can add up to frustrations for users. Sites have improved those, and I've seen improvements in those sites' positioning from the prior updates. And another big thing I think is content cleanup. I think if you have a website, especially one that's been around for a really long time, and there's a lot of old content that's not getting traffic, it's just sitting there, it's weighing down the site. If you do a really thorough content audit, clean that stuff up, delete stuff you don't need, no index things, consolidate, update, etc. I think that is a sub or indirect or secondary thing related to trust in a way, in a loose way, that I think is really, really important to not also skip over.
And I think I'll add two more things. Oh, sorry. Yeah, two more things.
Thank you.
One is take a look at how aggressively your sites are funneling users into converting. Because one of the patterns that we're seeing in sites that we're reviewing is they're very, very aggressive. So you go to the site and there's a massive pop-up and there's like, and so let's say I'm just looking for information as a searcher and I have no buying intent. I feel like Google has taken a lot of e-commerce sites, a lot of sites that sell products, and demoted them for informational queries. So I feel like Google got better at saying, oh, this person just wants to learn more about this subject. They don't want to buy. And if I land on your site and everything is like, buy, click here to, join, it's fine to have, calls to action and trying to convert people. But what we're seeing is a lot of these sites were just super aggressive with their pop-ups, their ads, the funnel basically. And so that's one thing I'd watch. The other thing too is if any of these clients have medical, financial, legal information, you want to make sure that it's kept up to date. And so that's one of the things that's in the Quality Raters guidelines too is content regularly updated, and are you making good use of citations and references? So definitely if you have medical content at all, you need to make sure that like wherever possible, you've researched and you've referenced, this scientific article says this, and then regularly update that. And so we recommend putting a last updated date on posts if it's relevant. If it's something, there is some evergreen content that probably doesn't need to be updated. But that's something that we're noticing too as a trend is that the sites that are actually doing well after this update, they have, everything that they claim is backed up by references.
Awesome. And I believe we have a couple minutes for your last question. What is your last question?
Great. I think this all builds to it really well. Link building. Dan, I know I've heard you talk about link building. You don't even like to use that term exactly.
Yep.
I would love to get your thoughts on it because do you focus on it? Do you just allow it to happen naturally with good content? Because when we build, we still build links, but we really focus on building quality links. We use guest blogs. We make relationships with websites where they're updating their information so they're linking to the correct place. A lot of that kind of work. But what do you typically do and what would you recommend?
Yeah, I'll jump in first. I'll try to give this really quickly. I generally, for the most part, don't build links except for when it's a very specific situation where you really need something extra to drive the extra authority, awareness, whatever it is, to push that up in visibility. A concrete example might be it's a brand new website. They have no authority at all. It's all like new content, etc. You need to do promotion. I mean, that's just good marketing. So what I do for link building is I don't really call it link building because that's not what I'm doing. That's not my goal. I might call it PR, like Marie mentioned. I might call it just like great networking or providing guest content. So there's these activities that generate links that I do a lot. I use Harrow a lot, help a reporter out. That gets links, but I'm really doing that to be in front of reporters and on news websites. So that's what I do, but it's a very focused situation. I think the only other situation link building really seems to apply and apply well is when you have what I call like a receptive link audience. That might mean like an audience that is receptive to your outreach, like the classic Brian Dean style outreach you might do for skyscraper technique. A lot of industries don't like outreach like that. And if you're in one of those spaces, I would say to ignore it because you're going to hurt your brand more than help by just ignoring people. So that's my 2 cents. Marie, what do you think?
Sure. This is kind of an unpopular opinion amongst SEOs, but I honestly think that Google is not paying any attention to the majority of links that are online. So when the Penguin algorithm finally, remember how we had to wait for 2 years for Penguin to update, like almost 2 years? I think the reason why it took that long is because the engineers were working on how can we actually figure out which links to count. And if we could just ignore the vast majority of SEO-made links, then nobody has to worry about being demoted by negative SEO. I mean, we can have a whole discussion on that for another time, but the point is that I think that a whole bunch of link building that we're doing as SEOs is a complete waste of time. So one of the things that I'll be speaking on in the next few months at a couple of events is how does Google know which links to count? And there's some really cool patents. I know Bill Sawalski's written about this patent that talks about trusted seed sites. And they list, for example, the New York Times. If you get a link from the New York Times, it's pretty sure that you didn't pay for that link. I mean, I'm sure there are ways to get in there, but it's probably because you did something worthy of getting linked to. Your company is worthy of that. And then they say, they look at the distance from the New York Times. So, if the New York Times links to a site that links to a site that links to you, that link's probably good. But if you're getting links from places where nobody ever visits those sites or nobody's ever going to click on the link, there's a patent too that talks about how links that if a page has a whole bunch of links pointing to it, but nobody's clicking on those links, that page could be demoted as spam. And this is outside of Penguin. This is not the Penguin algorithm. So, but the interesting thing from that patent is that it tells us that Google knows how many people are clicking on links. So, it's going back to the old days. I remember when I first started in SEO, for some reason, I was sheltered from the idea that you could buy links, and so I was trying to find all these ways to legitimately get people to want to link to me. And that's what we should be doing now, right? Whereas like SEO for years has been, how can we trick Google into thinking that people are linking to us? So, with that in mind, I'm okay with some guest posting. Provided you're I'll guest post on Moz or on SEMrush, I'll post on places where I know people are going to read my content and they're going to click on that link and they're potentially going to become my client. But I don't do guest posting just so I can get links out there.
Awesome. Marie, great answer. And I forget how to pronounce your name already. Talmage?
Talmage. Yeah, you got it.
We're going to let you go and let you hang up so I can call the next caller. But thanks so much for calling into Experts in the Wire. All right, Marie. Yeah, fascinating stuff with actually thinking about what actually counts for a link. I think we often overlook that or forget to even think about that. I'm going to call in Victor, our last caller here. Give him a chance to answer. I think this is going fairly. Victor.
It's good.
Hello, Dan.
Hi, Victor. You're on Experts on the Wire with myself and Marie. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
Great. Good to see you. Victor, where are you calling from?
I live in Romania.
Romania, great. Nice. It must be late for you there.
Yeah, it's about 10 o'clock in night.
Wow, awesome. Thanks for staying up and calling in. We've got about 10 minutes to help you out here, so I don't have any questions from you. So we're doing these right off the cuff here. So why don't you jump in and what's your question?
Okay, I have some questions. So my website is it's about store hours, and in order to gain trust in Google, I started to create infographics. So I started to promote those to people, and I like this. It's very. I like to do this, but I'm wondering if this will help me to get mentions and to get trust in Google. I mean, because when looking on some SEO tools like Hrefs, and I've seen that I have too many backlinks from other pages, like not the homepage, and I have a very, let's say, low number of backlinks on to my homepage. So I just wondering if this is a normal situation to have more backlinks from other other pages, not to homepage. And if this strategy to create infographics and promote will help me to gain more trust.
Big backlink theme today. So Marie, I'm going to let you jump in first. What do you think?
Yeah, so this is really related to the question that we just had, which I think you probably didn't hear the answer to. So one of the things that I was saying was that Google is getting really good at figuring out which links to count. And I honestly think that a huge number of the links that are out there right now, Google's putting no weight on them at all. So infographics, I think they can be good, but most of the time they may not be that helpful. So the ones that are good are ones where people like legitimately find it interesting. Because I've seen situations where somebody published an infographic and it's super basic information that like nobody's really wanting to read, nobody's sharing it, but you're able to get it published on places because you have arrangements, or maybe you've paid some money, or you have connections with people. And I think if you have an infographic and nobody's clicking on the link to go back to your website, it's probably not going to be a very helpful link for you to get. The other thing to keep in mind is that this is going back a few years ago, but in a Help Hangout, John Mueller had said once, somebody was asking about infographic link building, and he said that Google can actually see, he said, if all of your links are that kind of link, then that may not help you. So Google, and now I'm adding a little bit of personal interpretation into this, but I really believe that Google can see what kinds of links you're getting. So they want to, the reason why links count is because if I link to you, I'm saying I really recommend your website. I think it's good for my readers. When I put something in my newsletter, it's because I want my readers to engage with this website, right? And so if Google sees that the only type of link you have is from infographics that you've made yourself, that you've syndicated yourself, and nobody is actually going out of their way to recommend your business other than to link to the infographics, then that could be a problem. So I would try to get, whether the link goes to your homepage or to your, your inner page, I do think you need to get links to your homepage of people who are actually talking about your business in order to, and it's not like Google says, oh, you need this many percent, of this type of link or whatever. But in order for Google to actually count the links, in my opinion, they have to truly be people wanting to mention and recommend your business.
Awesome, Marie. I'll jump in. I love the specificity in your answer, because where my mind goes is I always want to jump back to the beginning, like the basics. And the first thing I would really do is get an understanding of what your goal is for the website. So in other words, what I mean by that is like the fundamental of SEO, it all begins with the keywords. What are the keywords that you're trying to rank for? Your business keywords, like transactional stuff that makes you money, and then your informational stuff. And so I would say, before you even think about links, you want to make sure that the website itself is set up correctly. Like you have the right pages built to target the right keywords. Because oftentimes what I find is a lot of people, they jump to link building or they jump to some sort of content marketing thing without first determining what are the pages I need to drive the traffic that I want. So let me turn it back to you, Victor, just to ask for a second real quick here. What was your business again? You said store something. I didn't even quite catch that. What is the business?
Information website. It's called hoursopen2close.com.
So you're trying to rank for basically the business hours of other businesses that you list on your website?
Yes.
I see.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's a very interesting website, by the way. And so basically, what's your goal? Yeah, what's your goal? Is you want to rank for, let's say, like there's a store near me, like I'm trying to think of a name off the top of my head, Target, right? You're trying to rank for like Target store hours?
It's yes, and also like what times Target close and what time does Target open. They're pretty simple questions. I used to rank very high on this keyword, but with the last algorithm updates, other sites overranked me. And when I looked at their backlinks, they have fewer than me. I have huge amount of backlinks. So I'm thinking if it's not a problem because I don't have too many backlinks to homepage, but there are many backlinks to other pages. And I think what Mary said, they started to ignore those links.
Maria, I'll let you chime in. Go ahead.
Yeah, and one of the things I'd really look at too is, are you providing value that people can't find elsewhere? Because if I'm looking for Target, what time does Target close tonight? I could probably quickly find that either on their website or, a knowledge graph. Like often that information is just on the SERPs. I mean, Google's got it there, right? Yeah. So this is a pattern that we've seen consistently, is that websites often will drop in rankings if they're not adding significant value. So that's something I'd look at. I mean, it's hard without actually seeing your site, but think of it from a user's perspective. Like, are you, and it's hard because website owners will often say, well, I've aggregated the data, or the design is nicer, but really, if you think of it from a user's perspective, I don't care what the design looks like. I just want to know what time the store closes. And if I can get that information from Google, then there's really no reason for Google to rank you. So that's something to think about.
That's why I'm starting to create other pages which really add value. So I started to research and create some really interesting, unique content that no one can find elsewhere. And I expect people to link naturally to those pages. But I'm asking if the other hours pages will survive in the future.
And I mean, if that's all that's on those pages, I don't know how well they'll survive. And the other bad news is, I mean, if you have hundreds or thousands of these pages that basically contain information that people could find elsewhere, Google can see that as a sign of low quality, and that can affect the ranking of your other pages on your site. So one thing that I would suggest for you is to maybe look at what kind of user-generated content you could get on those pages. Just thinking of, like, off the top of my head, like things that people wouldn't be able to get just from the Google results. So, for example, if I'm looking for what time does Target close, maybe you could have some crowdsourced information on where do I park near Target, or how popular is Target in this town, or it's hard to come up with it off the top of my head, but Google really likes user-generated content, provided that you moderate it well. It's not just spam. But if you can so you really need to brainstorm on ways that people will say, oh yeah, I don't just want the hours, I want to go to his site because it's got all the information. It's always so good. That's the type of thing. So you want to go well above and beyond what already exists.
And how are you monetizing that traffic, Victor? With ads? What was the monetization strategy?
Yes, it's only ads.
I mean, so you can basically, you have one or two choices. I think Marie highlighted it really well. But one is make these pages better, make the store hours pages better. Or two, shift your entire content altogether and still talk about things related to retail or people shopping locally or whatever it is. But you've got to use content marketing instead and create articles. I think you're on the right track. You're in the right mindset with the infographics, but maybe executing on it slightly differently to what Marie spoke to earlier is the way to go. But I think that's your two choices really in this, because Marie said it really well. I mean, these pages are commodity information unless you add something unique to them. So.
And so the old mindset in SEO is that we could take any page, and if we got enough links pointing to it, it would rank well. And we're seeing that that's not the case anymore. We have a client that years ago, they had this manual penalty, and so that's how they first came to us, because they had been doing way too much link building. And then they came to us recently, and we've started to do some regular SEO for them. We haven't built a single link for this site, and yet they've grown 500% in the last year after having years of being stagnant. And so we've just worked on, technical stuff and mostly user experience, saying people land on this page. Where do we want them to go? How do they get their information? How can we make this better for them? And we didn't build a single link, and they saw growth. So I mean, links are always going to be important, but any way that you can build your own links is getting less and less effective, in my opinion.
Awesome, Marie. Well, Victor, thanks a ton for calling in on Experts in the Wire. I appreciate that. I hope that was helpful, and we're going to let you go. I think you're just going to hang up the line there. Marie and I are going to finish up the episode. So thanks again, Victor, and I appreciate you calling in so late from Romania.
Yes, thank you to Dan and Mary. I really appreciate your advices. Very helpful.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Victor. Yeah.
Thanks, Victor.
You're welcome.
Victor.
So I can close now?
Yeah, close the call. Yep.
Yes. Thank you.
Still figuring this out. Thanks.
Yes. Have a good day.
Thank you.
You too. Take care. Awesome, Marie. Well, just to wrap things up, I mean, I think that was a really great question towards the end, because I often find, do you see this a lot where like the entire sort of business model is incorrect and that
Yes.
flows into the SEO, and it's sort of like they need to go back a few steps? You see that quite often?
Yeah, we see it all the time. I mean, the last review that my team and I just completed was a site that everything on the site was something I could get from Google search results. There was really no reason for this site to exist. And again, I sound like a broken record, but in the past, you could take that site and build links to it, and it would rank well. And so this business that's been around for like 20 years, they've been on the internet since the internet was alive. That's worked for them for many years, and now that's not working anymore. So we see that commonly, that, things change. And so if you're providing a service that Google can just replicate, that's tricky. I would be worried.
Yeah, be careful. So, Marie, I'm going to give you one more chance to mention your podcast, your website, anything you'd like, anywhere you'd want to point the listeners to check out.
Sure thing. So thank you again, Dan. Probably the best place to connect with me is on my newsletter. So if you go to mariehaynes.com/newsletter, and once a week, my team and I put out a very large newsletter. We have two versions. One is free, one is paid. The paid version has about at least 5,000 words each week. So it's a bit to read through, but really good tips and also the latest Google news. And then, the podcast you can find on iTunes and all the regular podcast places. Just search for me or search news you can use, and you'll find it.
Awesome. And Marie, I remember it just came back to me after I hung up when we did our very first interview for episode 1 of Experts in the Wire. I don't know if you thought the same thing, but when I hung up, I remember just thinking that was a ton of fun, and I just had so much energy, and I went and booked like the next 10 guests right then and there. And I'm getting that deja vu, that same sort of reaction to this format right now. What do you think? Should we?
Yeah, this is great, Dan. I think it's really good. I mean, I was a little bit worried about answering questions on the fly, because you never know.
Yeah.
And I think it's fine to say, you'll have questions probably if you keep doing this that you or your expert who you have on are probably going to say, I don't know the answer to that. And that's totally okay, right? We all have our own opinions. But yeah, this was a really good discussion. So keep doing it.
Awesome.
I like it.
Great. Well, I'll also get the feedback from the listeners, of course, but glad to hear that you think it went well. I know I definitely enjoy doing this format, so I hope the listeners did as well, and maybe I'll do it again. So, Marie, thanks again for joining me on episode 100 of Experts in the Wire. I'll put some
good stuff, Dan. Thanks for having
sound
me.
effects in there. All right, let me hit stop on this. How do I stop recording? Okay.
There we go.